On September 26th, the Indian Air Force bid farewell to the MiG-21, closing the chapter on its 6 decades-long service to India. In an elaborate and emotional ceremony in Chandigarh, the jets of the number 23 Squadron, the Panthers, took to the skies one last time with Air Chief Marshal Amarpreet Singh at their helm as they bid farewell to the supersonic jet that defined India's skies for 62 long years.
Sheer numbers, I mean, at some point it accounted for more than half of the Indian Air Force. That's a big number by any metric.
While the IAF routinely retires aircrafts, what was so unique about this one? And why did it receive so much attention? From its daring missions to its many controversies,
if you mishandled it, it would not, allow you to get away.
The answer lies in the long, defining, and checkered service of the aircraft with the Indian Air Force.
Can you imagine this small little aircraft could take on any role that could be envisaged by any air power?
We spoke to former pilots of the aircraft to understand why the MiG-21 was so special.
I can go on and on and on because I'm so intimately, in love with this aircraft.
Why did India buy it? How did it perform in war?
Don't forget that till just in the very recent past, the MiG-21 did shoot an F-16.
Why was it called the Flying Coffin or the Widowmaker?
We've had a share of technical defects, manufacturing faults, quality control issues.
And how did it become the backbone of the Indian Air Force? Let's understand. The Indian Air Force was at a crossroads in 1962. On one hand, China had just broken the illusion of India's secure eastern front, and on the other, Pakistan was on a shopping spree in the United States. We talked to Dinakar Perry, a security studies fellow with Carnegie India and former defense correspondent with The Hindu, about the situation.
In the 60-61, in fact, that phase, Pakistan brought the F-104 starfighters from the US. It also got a high-altitude strategic reconnaissance aircraft from the US. I mean, the starfighter could actually fly Mach 2, which is twice the speed of sound. And the strategic reconnaissance aircraft could actually fly up to 65,000 feet. So Indian Air Force, that kind of switched the balance, in a way, the region towards Pakistan, gave that technological impetus. That's when Indian Air Force was looking for a new aircraft to kind of match these and, outpace these two.
At this juncture, the IAF needed an aircraft that was fast, agile, and most importantly, affordable. Speed was the top priority here, as the fighter had to be supersonic or faster than the speed of sound, much like the Pakistani starfighter. We spoke to Air Commodore Nayani Harish, VM, who was the test pilot for the MiG-21 BIS upgrade program and later the Tejas project.
So a whole lot of options were considered, including the F-104, the Mirage 3, and I think also the English Electric Lightning. But for reasons that probably the country is well aware, we did take the Soviet path.
After considering several options, India deemed the Soviet-made Mikoyan Gurevich 21F or simply the MiG-21F fit for induction. It became the very first Soviet fighter to enter service with the Indian Air Force. Squadron leader Ashish Bhushan, a former MiG-21 pilot and a Category A instructor in the IAF, spoke to us about the issue.
So we wanted an agile, quick to climb, versatile, supersonic airplane. We were not very rich. There was a limitation on the amount of money we had. The MiG-21 was one of the cheaper platforms. Everybody was not willing to give us airplanes also at that time. The Russians were. We got a full transfer of technology where they said, we'll give you the opportunity to make it here.
Designed by the Mikoyan and Gurevich Design Bureau of the erstwhile Soviet Union, the MiG-21 made its first public appearance in 1956. Small and light, it was built with a delta wing configuration, basically wings shaped like triangles. At 14.1 meters in length and a wingspan of just 7.2 meters, it was roughly half the size of India's modern frontline fighter, the Sukhoi 30 MKI. The aircraft weighed 6.13 tons and had a maximum takeoff weight of around 10 tons. The MiG-21 was essentially the Soviet answer to America's F-104 starfighter. Its intended role was simple: get airborne within minutes, climb to high altitudes, chase and shoot down enemy planes, especially bombers, with supersonic speeds, and return back to base. The initial versions carried just two K-13 infrared missiles without cannons or heavy guns. On the morning of March 2, 1963, India's first MiG-21 reached Mumbai port and was formally inducted into the number 28 squadron at Chandigarh on April, earning them the title of the first supersonics. Thus began the MiG-21's India chapter. Former Air Chief Marshal Dilbagh Singh, then Wing Commander, became the first Indian pilot to fly the aircraft in India.
Let me guarantee you that all of us had a similar experience. Okay, the rate of acceleration, of course, coupled with the exhilaration that we were all feeling, that we were finally flying a real fighter, and the iconic MiG-21. Very, very clearly, we all felt this and we discussed this. We didn't know when it got airborne.
This happened in the month of April, I think April 12th, 1984 was the date when I first stepped into a MiG-21. But then the very maze of switches and dials and levers that the MiG-21 cockpit is famous for was something unnerving.
All I remember is this thing of undercarriage up, undercarriage up. So, the thought of that we'd actually gotten even airborne, was not there. It was too quick.
When that R11 engine kind of sprang to life and, it has a very peculiar whine. I actually had goosebumps on my hands when that happened.
In the 1965 India-Pakistan War, the MiG-21 saw its first, albeit limited, combat. By 1971, the MiG-21s were ruling the skies over Dhaka and West Pakistan. They recorded the first ever supersonic jet-on-jet kills against the American-built F-104 starfighters and F-86 Sabres of the Pakistani Air Force, while also carrying out the historic strike on the governor's house in Dhaka. In just 2 weeks of war, MiG-21s of the Indian Air Force rewrote combat history.
The famous bombing of the Dhaka governor's house or the other shooting down that happened. And if you see the history of it and the amount of kills it's made, whether by the Iraqis or by the Vietnamese or whether the North Koreans, again, and then very recently, our very own Falcon Slayer, I happened to meet him. He's from my squadron just the day before.
Decades later, during the 1999 Kargil War, the MiG-21 transitioned into a high-altitude ground attack and reconnaissance platform under Operation Safed Sagar, relentlessly targeting enemy positions in the unforgiving mountains of the Himalayas. At its peak in the 1980s and the 90s, the MiG-21 and its variants formed nearly 60% of the IAF's fighter strength. With 873 MiG-21s inducted, India was flying the Russian jet in roles that even its original designers had not imagined.
Without a doubt, we have used this platform in all kinds of roles which was never really meant for or to be really designed for. But it was very versatile and it proved its way and it proved its mettle in all the wars.
So, for example, there's something called an operational readiness platform, ORP. So, MiG-21 is the best suited for that. So, till they were going out, they were actually one of the ORPs used. So, at the shortest possible time, you have to say scramble, 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 you take off.
While this was a testament to the IAF's ingenuity, it also exposed a deeper issue that still plagues India's armed forces: the lack of timely upgrades and repeated delays in acquiring new equipment.
The Air Force was projecting the requirement for replacing a MiG-21 right from the mid-1980s. That was the genesis of the LCA Tejas, right from the mid-1980s. Why that requirement was not met is something that I would not like to comment on.
Why couldn't we get a replacement? Well, there has to be first a will. You think the Air Force didn't want it?
For nearly 2 decades, the MiG-21 was even used as a trainer, a role it was never designed for, given its unforgiving controls and steep learning curves.
It was used for lead-in fighter training over, when was it? Starting from the early 80s. So we are talking about over 5 decades. It's been used as a lead-in fighter trainer.
Surprisingly, we made the MiG-21 do everything. We made it our training platform, right? Guys like me We didn't have the advanced jet trainer, so we had to be sent from an Iskra subsonic Polish trainer or the Kirans. Some of us flew that directly into the MiG-21 Type 77 cockpit. It was a quantum jump in terms of speed.
Though it actually, one of the government statements says it was suboptimal as a trainer, but it was still used.
And that is a significant reason for some of the losses that we suffered.
While pilots acknowledge that the MiG-21 suffered many accidents, they also point to other causes, including quality control lapses at HAL plants, human errors, engine failures, and bird strikes.
Widowmaker, flying coffin. These are just media getting creative negatively. But a lot of this information is also half baked and it's also perception. And I'm not blaming them. Crashes, yes, there were many accidents. Many of them were linked to the spares issue, many of them were linked to human errors. There were human errors not just in the air, there were human errors on the ground. Somebody leaving a screwdriver in the aileron bay or the bay next to the ailerons, in the undercarriage area. It's a human being who's left it. It's happened. And I've actually lost a friend in that manner, where he took off and he turned and the aileron got stuck because that screwdriver went and got stuck there. Certain design issues or things done at various establishments that made this airplane, including HAL. Okay, but they're all human beings everywhere.
So we've had our fair share of accidents and incidents related to quality control. And the one example that springs to mind immediately was to do with the engines. The R25 has a very, very sensitive component called the rotary slide valve, which has extremely tight manufacturing tolerances. We lost a couple of MiGs. Fortunately, I think most of them were ejections because that rotary slide valve would freeze. There were cases of ejection seats not being fitted properly, and we did have our share of bird hits. The environment in India, especially at some airfields, is really scary. And birds don't like aircraft flying in their airspace, and aircraft don't like birds flying in their airspace.
According to government data presented in the parliament in 2012 by the then Defence Minister A.K. Antony, India had purchased 872 MiG-21s between 1966 and 1980. Of these, 482 were involved in accidents between 1971 and 2012, leading to the deaths of 171 Indian Air Force pilots. The grim toll earned the fighter its notorious nicknames, the Flying Coffin and the Widowmaker. Yet, pilots maintain that the MiG-21 never truly deserved these tags. Indian Air Force's official records also point out that if one considers accidents per 10,000 hours flown, the MiG-21's rate was lower than many other fighters. At its peak in the 1990s and the early 2000s, the figure stood at 2.89 per 10,000 hours. That is, 2.89 accidents per 10,000 hours flown. This was later brought down to 0.27 in the late 2000s with induction of advanced jet trainers like the British Hawk 132.
Like I told you, the pilot knows his aircraft best. And believe me, all these, monikers like Widowmaker and Coffin, Flying Coffin were pure nonsense. We as pilots never bothered about it because we understood the aircraft a lot better than the public who coined such terms did. And the moment you step onto the aircraft, in fact, even before that, when you step out of the squadron and march proudly with your chest held high, your G suits nice and tight to the aircraft, you've got nothing else in mind but the mission itself that's ahead of you. And once you're in the cockpit, it's total detachment. There's nothing on Mother Earth that bothers you.
Despite its flaws, the MiG-21 transformed the Indian Air Force into a supersonic force. For decades, the IAF was synonymous with the MiG-21. Its delta-wing design even influenced later editions like the Mirage 2000s and India's indigenous HAL Tejas.
So, the bond between you and the machine, you also learn to identify the nuances or the complications or the, specific characters of each machine, even though the aircraft is exactly the same. But each machine has little differences. one will be slightly under part, one will be slightly over part, one will be, wanting to roll a little to the left, the other would not. So you actually get in sync with this machine and literally, start believing in it. It's something like almost like your best friend. That kind of a relationship is what it becomes.
It became a rite of passage for nearly every IAF pilot to fly the MiG-21s, transforming them from amateurs into masters, from flying officers to air marshals.
Overwhelming majority of pilots who are flying today in the Indian Air Force have trained on the MiG-21. They've honed their air combat skills, their air-to-ground bombing, gunnery skills, their instrument flying skills on the MiG-21. It has served a sterling role in shaping our pilots and molding them into capable air warriors over the years, over the decades.
The MiG-21's legacy with the IAF cannot be understated. Those who flew it swear by its capabilities and cherish their bond with the machine despite all of its tantrums. The teary-eyed farewell by current Chief of Air Staff, AP Singh, showed just how deep that bond runs.
Especially when it comes to the MiG-21, it had certain nuances that took a little while to understand. But once you understood, you felt at home. It was like your mama. You were sitting inside a cocoon and in that protective cockpit, and you felt so secure.
Unlike the other fields, the man or the woman who's directly going into harm's way in this job is finally the person who is in the machine, right? Everything else is supporting it, and that's a very important role, so don't get me wrong there. But finally it's you and the machine that's going into the harm's way as and when called upon, right? So, and also on a regular basis, and there are certain things that you call out, which are part of the emergency drills and certain other things where you call out that if this happens, we'll go into the ground and then we'll see what happens, right? So that is very much part of the being. That you could have a bad day and maybe not come back even in peacetime. So the bond, I think, then increases even more. It's a very interesting sort of a relationship that gets formed.
The Indian Air Force is now entering a new era with modern fighters, new challenges, and a shrinking squadron strength that remains a pressing concern. But the MiG-21's place in history cannot be erased.
The Tejas is the ideal replacement for the MiG-21. That was the envisaged role of the aircraft in any case. It's small, it's highly agile, it's difficult to see, it has enormous capability, and the best part is it's homemade.
Again, now as we see, finally we now have 2 squadrons of the LCA Mark 1, and Mark 1A again delayed now, the deliveries are delayed now.
Perhaps the words of former Air Chief Marshal Pratap Chandra Lal, DFC, sum it up the best. The MiG-21 gave the Indian Air Force wings it never had. That's all for now. For more such videos, please subscribe to The Hindu. If you have any feedback or suggestions for us, do reach out to us at videos@thehindu.co.in. Thank you.